What up, squad? Welcome back to the We Are Guys podcast. My man Willie is here. Juan is on his way. He's running a little bit behind, but we're going to get right into it today. We're going to be talking about how to transition from your standard American diet. Let's call it that, right? For me, it was a lot of fast foods. I ate fast foods every day. I ate soda every day. I ate cereal, a lot of sugar, a lot of chips, a lot of the crap every day. To now, my diet is a lot different, but obviously there was a process from eating these unhealthy foods to eating a more nutrient dense diet that ultimately is going to get us the physiques that we're looking for. So Willie, what was your transition like? Like, how did you go from point A to point B in your journey?
No, it took a while, man. Like I felt that I think the original goal for me was just to lose fat. And I think that when I started to just focus on losing fat, I probably still had this like weird attraction to like really, like high sugar foods like chips and sweets. So I always try to just find like low calorie versions of them. It took me a while to really like change my brain to eating just healthier foods in general, like making it a lifestyle. Even when I was losing fat, it didn't necessarily still trigger for me to like want to eat healthier foods. I had to start thinking about my why and start thinking about like a deeper connection to health versus fat loss for me to really start making a change.
So that didn't happen initially. So I think it's a good place for us to talk about that there is a difference between eating for fat loss, right? Eating for weight loss and eating for health. Two very different things. I think initially, I think it's a good idea to kind of find a middle ground there. And I think most people, they assume, I have to be eating kale salads and chicken breasts and broccoli and brown rice in order to lose weight. And I always reference this experiment that I did with myself where I ate Fruity Pebbles, nothing but Fruity Pebbles for a few days, ensuring that I was still in a calorie deficit and my body still lost weight. And I use that as an example to show it doesn't really matter, right? When it comes to strictly weight loss, it doesn't really matter that much what you eat. Did I feel good? Fuck no. I felt like shit, right? But the scale still went down. So that is an illustration of this principle that there's a difference between eating for fat loss and for weight loss. But so you're saying in the beginning, you didn't care about health at all. You were just like, how do I have to eat in order to lose this weight?
Yeah. And I will say this too. Some people count calories, some people count macros. And I also want to make sure people understand there's a difference. Like if you just said, hey bro, don't eat more than 2,000 calories today, I could definitely go eat a Big Mac meal. I'll be somewhere between 1,600 calories and maybe a Snicker bar. I'll be under 2,000 calories, and probably calories in, calories out will tell you, that you'll lose weight. But I still started off counting macronutrients, and I counted all three. So if you're truly being honest about a framework of a macronutrient calculator that makes sense, that's well-rounded, that's high, high in protein, moderate in carbs, low in fat, or whatever the case may be, it by design takes out certain foods just because it won't allow you to hit your macro targets. So I will still say that I still had like a general diet that was still had to include some type of vegetables, some type of like decent carbohydrates. I had to get lean protein in because I just couldn't spend my macros on, like fast food and stuff. But I still, my why was about fat loss. Like to your point, I would be like, okay, well, that just means I need to eat more Quest bars than Big Macs. But I didn't really think about like, okay, how does this food help me with like my muscle pain, or how does it help me with blood pressure, or how does it help me with vitality? It was probably you that I first like started talking to me about this idea of like longevity and trying to like live to 80 and 90, where I started to think about the foods that I put into my body and how that relates. Because you can still be very, lean, beach ready, not be eating the foods that really help your body function, and still live on average. The average Black man, they say, lives about to 70.
I think that
is that our age expectancy?
Yeah. So a few things there, right? You mentioned the difference between counting calories and counting macros. And I remember in the beginning of my journey, bro, I was so confused and for real, honestly, intimidated by this whole concept of macros. How can we simplify that for the user, right? For the listener? How can we make the concept of macros? Let's assume we're talking to Fat Brix, who did not know anything about it. Let's talk a little bit more about the difference between counting calories and counting macros.
Yeah, no, definitely. So like counting calories is just overall, how many calories you consume in a day. And so all foods that we eat have some form of calories. Calorie is a measurement of energy. So we know that, hey, how much energy did you take into your body versus how much energy did you burn? If your body burns more energy than it takes in, it will start to reduce some of your stored energy, which is stored as fat. And if you are able to take in more energy than your body needs, it will store it in forms of fat for future use. So you could literally just, manage your energy expenditure and your energy intake through calories, and in theory, lose fat. It doesn't take into account what type of energy you're eating. When you're counting macronutrients, you're counting, okay, how much lean protein, which is also muscle sparing. It also helps with protein synthesis, which should help you build muscle. So if I ate 2,000 calories of Fruity Pebbles, while I may lose fat, I may actually become skinny fat. I may actually still lose muscle in that process, in that weight. Carbohydrates, if I decide to go on like a keto diet, some people communicate that when they're on a ketogenic diet, that they have less energy because our body prefers to use carbohydrates as energy. When you void itself of carbohydrates, your body then not turns to body fat. This is where people get confused. It starts using fat, the macronutrient, as energy source. That's all it does. It doesn't burn more fat. It just uses a different form of energy. So when you count macronutrients, it really takes all three of those groups into account, and it tells you need to hit certain goals within your food. So if you only can eat 50 grams of fat, for example, a Big Mac may have 48 grams of fat in just that meal alone. That means you would have to almost the rest of the day only eat the leanest of protein. Like I'm talking chicken breast and bread the rest of the day in order to not go over your macronutrient target. That's the difference.
So it sounds like if you're looking to just drop numbers on the scale and not really consider your body composition at all, then you can just focus on calories, right?
Yes.
But on the other hand, if you're trying to make sure that you're preserving muscle, right? You're trying to shape your actual physique, then you need to be focusing on counting macros. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, it's the quality of foods that you put into your body will definitely have a big impact on your body composition. Absolutely. And macronutrients helps you do that.
Okay, so Juan, take us to the beginning of your journey, right? We're talking about the transition from eating your standard American diet to having a more health conscious approach to your nutrition. So for me in the beginning, I ate fast food every day. I ate junk food every single day, right? And now my diet is a lot different, right? But there was a process to get there. Talk to us about what your diet was like before you went on your journey and a little bit about what that transition was like.
So for me, what I realized is like I had no connection to my food. It was just like I would eat to eat. And it was the struggle for the longest time. And even back to when I was in shape, it was like I'm just eating because it's what I have to do. But I really had no connection to the food. It was like I would always talk shit to myself about, oh, this is just what I got to put in my mouth. So I mentioned I didn't really understand proteins, carbs, fats, and what that did to me. And I didn't know how much I needed of it, any of that. I grew up on a Hispanic diet, rice, beans, chicken. That's what we ate every single day. And that was what was at the table, right? And then, throughout school, I was on free lunch. So it was like the what was it, like the little chicken nuggets that they would have from time to time, and like chicken patty sandwiches, right? I just ate what was in front of me, So that was my relationship to food from the jump. There was really no awareness around what is this food doing for me? What is it doing to me? I think once I started gaining weight, I started realizing like, oh my God, when I eat, because I wasn't as active, I feel like shit. But what would I do? I would eat, sit down. I had an office job at the time when I started packing on the weight. I would sit down, eat, and not move around. And that's how it initially started stacking on. So there was really no understanding of what foods do and any awareness. I don't even think I had access to it to be able to go there and be like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. There was no awareness around that at all. And I would even say, even in my journey, especially here over the past 5 years, really understanding, like really feeling it and understanding what's going on, that really didn't start clicking in until recently. You know, so that there's in a nutshell what it's been like for me.
I got a question for you. Like, I think I'm still learning to do this, but like, don't you think that also we were like programmed to like always finish our food too?
Yes.
So we never really thought about like, hey, if this food is good or not. It's just like, I'm gonna finish it. And even now, like, I'll have foods even if I'm not like doing super healthy, stuff. Like, let's say I'm eating a burrito and I'm like, this burrito is mid, but I'll still finish it though.
Because you have to eat it.
Yeah, exactly.
Brix is shaking his head. But so I think culturally, right? Like that's
right.
I'm a Hispanic. I'm from Panama, so it's like we had to finish all our food. And I'm the oldest of three. And I have two younger brothers. We have different fathers, but we had very different body types. Like I was always the big guy, and I was very protective of my brothers. But I remember we weren't allowed to get up until we finished our food, and I think that's instilled culturally, right? Like, hey, you have to finish this. You have to eat it. So it didn't matter what it tasted like. There's no way to connect to that when like you have the pressure from your parents, so like, hey, you better eat this shit or you can't get up and do anything after this.
I have to play mind games on myself. So if I'm eating something that's like, again, not necessarily like chicken or broccoli or something like I'm eating on a diet, I literally will like eat something. I'm like, this isn't really that good. I'll literally wrap it up and throw it away immediately. And it's really just like a thing for me, like it's a self-control thing, like throw it away, make it to where you can't consume it later so that I don't go back. Cause I'm somebody who will eat because of boredom, or I would eat because like I bought it and I want to finish it. So I'll like literally have to do something like drastic, like, okay, I'm eating this food. It's cold. It doesn't taste that good. I don't enjoy it. I could finish it and I still wouldn't be mad at it, but it's not going to do anything for me. I'll just immediately just throw it away. Like almost like as like a get off me type thing.
Bro, I have found myself doing that more so often in the past couple weeks, just, with reconnecting with Brix and just speaking about this and thinking about it, like I've definitely been like, okay, shit, I really don't like how this tastes. Like I don't have to finish it. Like that's again something newer for me.
So I think when you start really paying attention to what you're eating, you spend a season tracking your calories, tracking your macros, you start to be a little bit more particular about how you spend your calorie budget, right? So if I'm eating anything that's not something I'm enjoying, I will not eat it, right? It's like spending, let's say you have $1,000 budget every month to spend on whatever you want. And it's like spending that on some shit that you don't even like. Like I wouldn't do it. So even now, when I'm eating mindfully, when I go out to a restaurant and I notice that, hey, I'm full, right? By paying attention to my satiety cues, I'm full. Like you guys, I got to fight against that programming of, finish your food. You're paying for this. And what I do is I'll just fucking pour water on that shit. That sounds extreme. Ooh. Right there. Right in the moment when I notice I need to stop eating, I'll pour water on it. I've been on dates and I've done that. And and the chick will look at me like, bro, what did you like? I'm like, don't worry about it. Just I needed to do that. Like, just know I needed to do that. And that shit works for me, man. But I think this is a good segue to talk more about identity and some of the eating habits and patterns that we picked up in childhood and how that still affects us to this day. Because I think a lot of that stuff happens subconsciously and we don't really recognize the connection, right? So I guess what are some questions we can ask, like the listener, what sort of questions they can ask themselves or what sort of reflecting they can do in their childhood to start to connect some of the stuff that their parents instilled in them,
Well, I think one of the things, first and foremost, like this is my thought, and I could be wrong, and I struggle with this. Like I'm on this podcast not to come off like I got it figured out because I don't. I still believe I struggle with mindful eating. I still think I struggle with times of periods where, I'm not being as thoughtful about my nutrition as I should be. But I think one of the things that I would say that's like easy to start with is like just slowing down when you eat. Because I think we do have this idea of like, maybe it's an American thing, maybe it's a me thing, I don't know. But we get food in front of us and we get ready to devour it. And we don't even really like just slow down and like process it and chew it and like have conversation through it so that we are being able to send better signals about what we're actually putting into our body. Because maybe if you slow down a little bit, you probably would have more triggers to say, what the fuck am I eating? Or how does this make me feel? I felt like when I would eat crazy, I never slowed down enough to even ask that question. It would be gone in like 5 minutes. So I couldn't tell you how I felt. I just know I'm full.
Yeah. And I grew up in a household where food was limited and I had siblings. And sometimes like if you didn't eat the food fast, you didn't get enough or you didn't get your share, right? Because my little brother would fuck the food up. So I think that's that speed at which we eat is some of that for me for sure is childhood experience based. But I've had to really remind myself to be present with my food. And the reason why is when you eat fast, you do not allow the satiety cues, right? Your body tells you when you've had enough. Your body tells you when you're full or when you're satisfied. But if you are distracted or if you're eating too fast, you don't give your body the opportunity to send you that satiety signal. And that's why it's super important. I think that's a good first thing to do, right? A good first thing to do when you're trying to transition from a less healthy to a more healthy diet is to slow down and really pay attention and kind of set a boundary around meals, at least one meal a day where you're not distracted, you're not scrolling social media, you're not watching television. It's okay to have a conversation over a meal. I think that's actually pretty good to do because it forces you to kind of slow down, right? You take a few bites, you chew, you may have some words to exchange, and then you get back to it. But the mindless aspect of flicking, Netflix or social media, you're not present with your food and you miss the satiety cues, right? And once your body already tells you, oh, I'm full or you've had enough, but instead you pack on an additional 800 calories because you're not even paying attention to the cues. So learning the cues is huge as well, for sure.
Yeah. And Brix, like I got that from you, like the cues, right? And again, very recently. And I think the common thread with what we're all saying here, you're asking, hey, what are some questions that you can ask, is understanding that we all have programming. Like we all have something that we go to as an unconscious way to deal with anything. So when it comes to eating, right, and you're trying to address your health, and trust me, food is impacting you in every way, shape, or form, right? It is our energy source, right? And you can I eat food to entertain myself sometimes, right? But now I know I'm more aware of what I'm doing, right? So it's like the other part of this is like and this is a concept that I've taken on over the past 20 years, and that's not making anything right or wrong, like that concept.
Yeah.
So that concept of like this isn't right or wrong, just like take it for what it is. Like what are you doing, right? Not giving it judgment, not having it be like an evil thing. Because again, for me, when I think about how whenever I go to talking shit and I do judge it and I say I'm wrong and like why the fuck did I do that, it spirals into other shit. And then I just make I end up making stupid ass decisions for the rest of the day, right?
Yeah, you almost make it worse when you do that, right? So I think the self-compassion, right? Just as a general practice while you're trying to transition in anything in life, it's going to be an important ingredient is to have self-compassion and just recognize that this is going to be a process, and allowing any sort of guilt or shame to fucking like take over your mind is only going to make things worse. So let's say you forget to be mindful while you're eating and you're scrolling, and then you remember, oh shit, I listened to that podcast. Brix said I shouldn't be scrolling, and I just fucking scrolled through this entire meal. And now you're like beating yourself up, right? And it creates this perpetual cycle, because now you feel guilty, and now it's creating more emotion, it's now creating more negative emotions, and that's causing you to want to fucking eat more, right? It's this cycle. So being aware of the activity of your mind during this process, right? During this process of you going from where you are currently nutritionally to where you're trying to go, a big ingredient in helping you is going to be fucking patience and self-compassion. You have to be compassionate with yourself. We're trying to break a spell.
Yeah.
I say that shit all the time. You're trying to break a spell. Food, and like Willie said, I never want to come across as if I have it fully together when it comes to food, because I have certain compulsions with food and certain habits that I think I've brilliantly learned how to work around them to look how I want to look. But I still have some things that I need to heal and address about my relationship with food. So this is not coming from this hype, like, oh, I figured it out.
Right.
But I think it's insightful to share how important the grace and the self-compassion is in this process.
Yeah, and isn't that it's always going to be ongoing and never ending, right? We're never fully healed. We never ever figure anything out. So anybody that is going down this journey, just understand that. Like I remember hearing this saying when I was like early in my sales career, that had me hyper aware of my words and my thoughts, and that's everything that you do either moves you closer to or further away from your goals. So if you can get around the awareness of like, okay, you keep talking shit to yourself, you keep fucking being negative about this, oh, you're wrong. Like, you're actually taking steps backwards when you entertain and think about those thoughts. Whereas, hey, this is what it is. This is what I did. Okay, I accept it. I don't want to do that anymore. Let's move forward. Let's make this happen. Now you're taking steps forward, right? So even your thoughts is a big thing. The awareness around your thoughts, and again, having grace. So yeah, I'm with you, and I obviously don't have this figured out, and I'm very clear that I never will have it 100% figured out. But the ride's pretty fun at this point,
For sure.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit more about food addiction, because I don't think that it's brought up enough in these types of conversations, right? When we're talking about weight loss, we treat alcohol or marijuana or any other sort of substance with this level of, okay, it's an addiction, because with addiction, there's a certain amount of grace that comes into the conversation with addiction. I think it's important to help identify if someone is experiencing addiction, right? Obviously, there's a spectrum there, but I think when you approach it from that perspective, like, okay, I may be dealing with an addiction here, there's probably a different approach, right? There's different levels. There's a different protocol that you may take, right? So would you guys say you were addicted to food?
I would say I was. I would say and I'm gonna take a different step here. I don't smoke. I don't drink. So I don't have like a typical vice that most people do use when they're feeling happy or feeling sad, because in my experience, most people turn to those things, right? So like stressed out, rolling up, hey, I'm having a good day, I'm gonna go get a drink after work, whatever. 90% of the people I've met have that as a vice. I don't. So I do, however, realize that's how I did use food though. I use food in a very similar vein. So when I would like have a good day, I was like, yo, I'm gonna go get a steak. I'm gonna go eat and sit down. Or I'm feeling sad, yo, this is some bullshit. Fuck her. I'm gonna go eat. So I did have an addiction to food, as that was my crutch. So I used it for every different feeling that I had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what about you, Juan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hearing what Willie just said with how he used food and how he was addicted to that. So like, I haven't had alcohol. I haven't put alcohol in my body, and I'm not even tracking it anymore. And it has definitely brought up, it's brought up a lot of my my go-tos, like what I go to, and realizing I don't think I realized that I had all these addictions to food, and mainly sugar, right? Like I say I have a sweet tooth, but it's not really about your tooth. It's like what's, how you process that food is, I love cookies. I love desserts. And that's what I would go to. And now that I haven't been drinking for as long as I have, I realize that, oh shit, like I would go to drinking to cover that up. And now it's food. So yeah, I mean, I'm obviously still working through all that. And I do think that that part is going to be different for everybody, but I think we all have, many addictions, and it's part of the reason why you end up overweight or not in the body, that you desire. It's because like you're doing a bunch of things that aren't aligned with your soul and your heart, and that leads to, that definitely leads to potentially having some addictions to things.
So I want to talk about some of the signals or the symptoms of food addiction, right? Just to give the listener something to identify if they may be dealing with food addiction. So having cravings despite being full, eating to the point of discomfort, right? And you guys let me know after I get through this list if you can relate to any of it. And constant preoccupation with food, like constantly thinking about food, obviously using food to cope with emotions, hiding when you're eating. Like if you go get seconds and you're like, you slide into the pantry because you don't want nobody to see that you just really piled up another plate. That, that may be a sign there, right? There may be a sign there. Having withdrawal symptoms, guilt and shame. Yeah, like it's kind of what I just alluded to before in that previous example. But these are some of the telltale signs that you should take a closer look. What do you guys do? Have you guys experienced any of that?
Yeah, I've experienced every single one of those, every single one, and mentioning earlier where I haven't had, so this morning I went and did the sauna and cold plunge. And what I realized is like, I get the same satiation and feeling of, like I feel good, and it's way better than what I used to do when I would have a glass of whiskey, like on a Friday after the week was done to decompress, right? Like I've noticed the feelings are very similar. The difference where with alcohol is like, with me, is I would continue to have that, and then it would spiral into shittier decisions, right? Where I would eventually be numb to, instead of doing like the sauna or the cold plunge, I would continue eating, right? Because when you throw alcohol in your body, that spikes the insulin, and you're craving all these foods and all that. So I wasn't aware, but that's what I was doing to myself, right? So yeah, I personally, I felt every single one of those at some point in time.
What about you, Willie?
Yeah, definitely, man. Like I think for me, I even on a diet, the idea of like being food focused is like you talked about. I've had probably for the last, I don't know, man, probably like 6-7 years where I get up in the morning, I think about what I'm going to eat in that day. And I think about like when I'm going to eat it and how much I can fit based on my calories. So I've definitely struggled with food addiction, even in a weight loss journey. Even when I had a body that I thought I could be proud of, I still think there was like a level of food addiction there. My relationship with food wasn't always healthy. I know that there were times where I would eat for sport. Like I could eat a tub of ice cream from Cold Stone and still ask you what was for dinner. Like I had a high tolerance for food. I still could. If somebody said, "Hey, how much could you eat in a day?" I could eat a good amount of food in a day without like really tapping out. I had to learn all those things were unhealthy, and I had to start understanding my hunger cues. But I think I struggled with food addiction probably for, I would say, a good portion of my adult life.
Yeah. And honestly, I still experience a lot of these shits, to be completely honest. I think I've learned how to navigate this shit really, really well. But to say that I'm completely healed from this shit would be a lie. That would be a lie. But I think it has a lot. So I have ADHD, right? And when you think about food addiction, the dopamine experience has a lot to do with how we create these compulsive relationships with some of these foods, right? It's just how we're wired neurally. And I think a big part of the reason why I have such challenge in navigating this is because of my neural wiring, right? It's like by default, I'm really low on dopamine. So I kind of find myself in these spirals where I'm like using food to just give me the dopamine hit, right? That I need. And I just wanted to add that to the conversation because I'm sure that's a common thing. A lot of people, struggle with ADHD, or I think it's a gift. But anyway, a lot of us have ADHD and are not really connecting the dopamine from food and how our ADHD could be contributing to that. And not just with, and I'm going to digress a bit here, but people with ADHD, be mindful of how that shows up in your relationship patterns as well, right? It's a big, big thing. But anyway, I don't want to go into that rabbit hole. But so if I had to go back to the beginning of my journey, right? And Fat Brix, like I mentioned earlier in the episode, he ate fast food every single day. He was not aware of calories and macros and carbs and fats. And he had no idea any of that shit existed. He was an extreme emotional eater, and 90% of whatever I ate was fucking processed, right? To now, I eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. I eat salads every day, a lot of lean protein sources, healthy fats. I eat avocado every single day, right? So if I had to try to guide Fat Brix, right, with the information that I now know, the information I know about myself, the information I know about nutrition, and I want each of us to do this, right? What would I do, right? If I could advise Fat Brix, right now, and control him, like literally put the knowledge that I have in my head right now into Fat Brix's head, what would I do? Right? So I'm gonna answer that. The first thing I would do, and this is probably not gonna make sense because I just said he has all the knowledge, but follow me. I would go super hard on educating myself about this stuff. I would read everything about nutrition. I would learn so much because a lot of what was happening was due to my ignorance, right? I didn't know any of this stuff. So obviously we make our choices with what we know. So I would educate myself. I would not just educate myself on nutrition, right? I would educate myself on the psychology behind why people eat. And I know this probably sounds far-fetched, but this is what I would actually do. And I think if this lands and someone's in the beginning of their journey and they really commit to like studying this stuff, I think it will make a huge difference in their journey, right? So I would study nutrition, I would study the psychology behind eating patterns, and then I would also fucking study myself. I would immediately start a food journal, and I would like prioritize this over probably anything in my life. I would be extremely consistent with tracking everything that I'm experiencing as it relates to whatever it is I'm eating. So food journaling, meaning I would track everything I fucking eat. And then I would also have a daily practice where I spend at least 10 or 15 minutes where I reflect on my eating choices and I would write down what was going on. What was the situation? What was I feeling? I would ask ChatGPT at this point to give me like a checklist of things for me to make sure that I am writing about as it relates to my mental, my emotional, and what I was actually eating. I would have sought counseling because a lot of what happened after I healed some of my emotional trauma, because that's another thing, right? A lot of our eating habits are connected to, we mentioned childhood shit, right? So understanding the connection between my mental and emotional trauma, my childhood trauma, and my eating habits is another thing that I would try to really unpack. Obviously, that would be a part of my journaling, my food journaling exercise, and the education piece, self-education and education on all of these topics that we're talking about here. I would just go super hard on really fucking understanding this stuff. And then having accountability, I would have joined some sort of community. I would have hired a coach. I would make sure that I had several layers of accountability to help guide my decision making. Right. I tried to do too much of that shit myself, and it caused a lot of unnecessary frustration and resistance in the process. But those are the main things that I would do. And I know it probably sounds far-fetched, right? But I think that's the fastest way to get from where I was to where I am now is those things, the education in those areas, and just like really working towards getting these like fucking breakthrough aha moments, like, oh shit, okay, I see the connection here. So erasing the ignorance would be my strategy. What about you, Juan?
Yeah, man. So for me, I'd keep it simple, brother. And I mean, a lot of the things that you mentioned are things that, okay, I definitely want to take on now. And I think I'm ready for some of that, like the food journaling, all that. I'm definitely ready to regiment it a little bit more. But, you know, if I had to go back and say, and say something to Fat Juan, I would say, hey man, realize that you're never, there is no end destination. Okay. Like you need to face what you need to face in the moment and not put anything off. So really bring presence to everything that you do. That's the key. And then, you know, one of the things I wish I had hired a trainer a lot sooner, you know, so I think that's something that I took way too long to do because, you know, for me, I graduated from college 20 years ago. I was in shape and I would go work out, but like, I just thought that I knew how to do everything. And I did know how to do the exercise, but like one of the things that you talked about with community. So like having a trainer, being in that community, that's one of the things I crave and I need every single time. Every single time I look forward to that, you know, like going to the gym is like going to the office, you know, and that ties into like another thing too, is like, I've been very fortunate and successful in the business world. And there's a lot of things that I think correlate with my fitness journey here now. Right. So having patience, grace, understanding, knowing that things don't come like that. Right. You have to, again, bring presence, bring grace to it. And, you know, another big thing for me, brother, like, and I think I shared this with you in the past, I stopped setting like these clear goals where, oh, I want to make this amount. I want to do this. I want to do this and that by a certain amount of time. I stopped doing that like right around, actually a couple of years before I started this fitness journey in 2019, like 2017, I was a part of this entrepreneur group and met some really amazing people. And I decided at that time, it's like, okay, cool. I'm just going to try something different. I'm going to come to my goals with like these intentions. So who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? How do I want people to feel when they're around me? And I brought that to my business. I brought that to how I solve problems. And that had my businesses explode. It had money flow in. You know, I've shared with you that I haven't, you know, essentially grinded and worked as hard over the past 5 years. And if anything, I wish I had taken that approach sooner with my fitness journey. Right. And I think I'm there now. Now it's like, I'm ready to journal. You know, I'm ready to use the Notion and track my habits. I'm ready to do all that now. Because for me, it was about, you know, simplifying this and coming to a place mentally where I could take all this on. So yeah, those are some of the things that I would tell Fat Juan.
What about you, Willie?
Yeah, I think for me, it was probably two things. I think number one, it would be hire a coach, and not necessarily a trainer. I want to make sure I'm separating the two. I would think a coach that kind of helped me speed up the part that Brix just talked about, right? Which is the knowledge part. Definitely, if I didn't have the resources, what Brix outlined would probably be where I would probably lean into, because I would have to go learn this stuff myself. But if you said, you know, if I had the resources, and even if I prioritize it, right? Because a lot of things are about prioritization with our resources. I would hire a coach, because hiring a coach could actually help cut down on the time it would take me to go research this thing. And I would want a coach very similar to what Brooks said about a therapist. Like when he was saying it, it was almost like the way they were coming into me were like almost like splitting myself in half. I would have like a therapist on one side and a coach on the other side for my fitness, because it's that overall health, 360, right? My mind and my body. And so like I would want a coach that could help me with asking me the questions that Brix was talking about, like how I'm feeling about food, a coach that could give me guidance on exercise, a coach that could help me understand it, like hold me accountable for calories. A good coach that really cares about you kind of does a lot of those things that Brix talked about and kind of helps you until you're able to go do it yourself, right? Like they say in the coaching industry, a great coach you don't need forever. Mm-hmm. A great coach would be giving you the tools to eventually do all the things that Brix just said on your own. But I would have needed a coach to kind of kickstart that, because if you would have told me just to go do it, think about it, Fat Willie was probably lazy as fuck. He had no accountability. So how are you going to tell me to go do all these things and I can't even fucking, follow through on the simple shit already? A coach would kind of like, a good coach speaks into your inner self. They motivate you. They push you to dig into the things that Brix talked about. So a coach would probably be number one, and maybe a close second would be calorie awareness. But if I had a great coach, they would teach me calorie awareness. So I'm gonna go with coach for number one. I would hire a coach that gave a fuck about me.
Yo, that coach sounds really familiar. I don't know.
Yeah, Willie, you did describe.
It wasn't even a plug, bro. It was like
I was gonna say, because for me, you describe what Brix has been for me, bro.
100%. But that's what it is, because not all coaches give a fuck about you, and I want to be clear about this.
No, that's the truth.
The one thing about online coaching has actually created a transactional relationship with a lot of coaches. I had a coach that I was fat for 2 years. He took my money every week or whatever payment scale I was on. He checked in with me all the time. Like every Monday, he would say, "Oh, that sucks for you. How are you going to get back on track?" A great coach is somebody that really genuinely taps into who you are and they want to see you win. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think everybody does that. Sometimes coaches get to a point where they have so many clients, or they're very distant from it. It's very transactional.
I had one thought that I wanted to finish on. So I'll just go ahead and do that. So he mentioned not having the discipline to even start the educational aspect of the journey, right? When he talks about where he was, where Fat Willie was. And what came up for me is like, if you want to make an identity shift, right? If you want to go from eating the standard American diet to eating a more nutrient dense food, you got to have a deep burning desire for change. That's the thing. If you're going to free yourself from the grasps of these foods, it's like you got to want this shit bad. So what I described may have sounded extreme, but the energy that I had in the beginning, I just didn't have the insight. I didn't have the education. The energy, the desire, the drive was there. I feel like it has to be there. That's going to manifest in different forms for all of us. But you got to want this shit bad. You have to want this bad, because this is, again, we're breaking a spell. It's not easy. The shit's not easy. It's going to require you committing yourself completely to it. I think the ROI on educating yourself on these areas that I mentioned, obviously getting the accountability from a coach, getting tapped into a community, these are all things that if you just took action on this shit right away, you're seeing some significant changes pretty quickly with these things in place. So again, there's a lot of information here. There's probably tons and tons of actionable takeaways from each of these. But I think the most important thing, like Willie mentioned, is to get support. Don't try to do this shit by yourself. There is a lot of moving parts to a weight loss journey, to a journey of improving your nutrition. There's a lot of moving parts, and you're going to feel overwhelmed if you try to do all this shit by yourself. A good first step, obviously, is listening to podcasts and educating yourself, but you need a system. There has to be some sort of structure involved in this process for you. There has to be something outside of yourself that you have to check in with in order to make sure that you're on the right path, right? So would you agree with that?
100%. I mean, the key thing you said there too, right at the end, is a system. right? Being a part of a community it helps you get to wherever you're trying to go that much faster, right? So we're not meant to do anything alone, like, and things are just way better when you do them in community, right?
For sure.
So you can share the downs and obviously the ups and all the things in between, right? So being a part of a community is super, super important, and understanding that you can fast track your journey by reaching out and getting help.
Yeah. So guys, if you're still listening, we have this community. Juan is a part of this community. It's the highlight of my world right now, right? The We Are Gods group coaching program. The information for that is in the show notes, is in the description. If you're watching this on YouTube, do yourself a favor. Don't try to do this shit by yourself. Don't try to do it by yourself. I always talk about how much heartache and fucking frustration I experience by making simple ass mistakes that any half-ass good coach would have helped me prevent, right? So, Willie, your point about coaching, spot on. That should be the number one action someone should take. And even if right now you can't afford a coach, find some way to put some sort of structure behind things, some sort of program to follow. Find some ways to have a system. You got to systematically approach this. It's hard to freestyle this shit. It's really hard. Any closing thoughts, Willie?
Man, I think ultimately, like we said, is it's about taking those small, simple steps. And I think when we talk about like awareness for food, like that's the key. And a coach can help you put that mirror up in front of you that you can start learning more about yourself. And the more you learn, that data is going to help you drive your behavior. And I think that's ultimately what we're saying is like the more you get to know yourself in multiple areas, you start to understand the sources of why you eat what you eat. And you'll have the power to change. And that's usually the power to habit formation is awareness and then a plan in place to fix it.
For sure. Guys, if you're listening to this podcast right now, I want you to screenshot it, tag us on social media. You can follow me at Brix Glover, Brix Glover. Juan.
Go ahead.
At
Evolve with Juan, EVOLVE with Juan.
And Willie, go ahead.
Willie_goes in.
Yes, all this information will be in the show notes as well. And thank you guys for listening, and we will speak to you next week. Peace.